name's Karen Stangram and welcome to Conquer Crochet, the channel for tips, tricks and techniques for conquering your crochet. If you're new here, please consider subscribing and hit the notification bell to make sure you're notified when a new video goes live. I post new videos every single week on a Sunday at 2 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to join your granny squares together using crochet. Last week's video showed you how to join them using stitches, and I'll put a link in the cards up here so that you can go back and compare the two different methods. I'd be really interested to know in the comments which method you prefer, so you can just give me crochet or sew, whichever you prefer, or depends on what your project is. So if you're excited to get going, give me a thumbs up and let's do this. Okay, so we're going to need some granny squares, and we're going to need our crochet hook, a needle for sewing in our ends, and a pair of scissors for cutting off those ends. Okay, so for this one I'm going to be using a contrasting yarn just so you can see the stitches. Ordinarily you'll be using the same colour yarn so that you can't see where the stitches join up the granny squares. So we need to have our granny squares facing the same way, so these are both the right sides. If I just flip this one over for you to see, that's how the wrong side looks. It's slightly flatter, whereas on the right side you get more of the bumps and you can see the stitches. It doesn't quite look as tidy on the back, I don't think. So we have our right sides here, so I'm going to fold my right sides together so the right sides are facing. I'm then going to make a slip knot, and I'm going to insert my crochet hook through both of those corner chain spaces. Tighten up my slip knot, and I'm going to chain one. Now we're going to be going into both loops on each of these chains here on both sides, so on the front granny square and on the back granny square. So I still have one chain here, so the slip knot I've done sort of counts as the second chain. So we've got 1, 2, 3. I'm going to go through that first chain, or the third chain if you like, and I'm going to do a double crochet, single crochet if you're using US terminology. I need to insert under both the loops on the first granny square and under both loops on the second granny square, and make your single crochet or your double crochet. Double crochet, now when you come to your chain spaces, you could, if you want to, go through the chain spaces, but I'm going to go through the loops at the top of those chains because I don't want to go through the chain space. It doesn't really matter, whatever you do, as long as you are consistent. That one doesn't want to go through with your stitches, then that's absolutely fine. So I'm just going to crochet, double crochet all the way to the end of that row, making sure that you're going in the same stitch that's opposite the one you've been going into on the other side. Otherwise you'll end up with wonky squares. Now if you watched my last video about the sewing, you'll know about the consistency, to make sure whatever you did in one corner you must do in the other corner. So I'm just coming up to that corner now. So I did slip knot, single crochet into that last chain. So I need to do, so it wasn't a slip knot, it was a double crochet. So I need to double crochet into that chain, which is easier said than done. In you go, and into this one here. It's funny how some of them actually go through quite easily and others don't. Oops. And then I'm just going to do excuse me, just going to do a slip knot, if it'll let me, into that last one there. Snip off my ends, and then I would weave that in, and what you get then is stitches on this side, or if you want to, you could have this as a design feature, and that way then I would say put your wrong sides together if you would like to have this as a feature, sort of like a window pane effect going round. So that's method 1, using double crochet to join your granny squares. This method, again, I'm using the contrasting coloured yarn. This method is the slip knot method, and I'm going to join my wrong sides together for this one. So I'm going to join the slip knot as I did in previous videos, or previous examples. Insert my hook into both the granny squares in that corner space, tighten up the slip knot, and there I am joined. So we're going to do slip stitches into the first loop you get here and the back loop on the other granny square. So I'm just going to do one slip knot into the chain, okay, so I'm going into this first stitch here out of the 2, and then on the next granny square I'm going to go into the back stitch, yarn over, pull through the 2 stitches and through the loop. So again, I'm going through the first stitch on the first granny square, I'm going through the back stitch on the second granny square, yarn over, pull through the 2 loops and through the one on your hook. And we do this all the way down to the end. When you come to your space, you can do the same thing with the chain stitches. Do the front one and the back one. Front loop, back loop, yarn over, pull through the 2, front loop, back loop, yarn over, pull through the 2, front loop, trickier on this one because that's where my knot is, sorry, back loop, yarn over, pull through the 2, and make sure I'm going into the right stitch, front loop, back loop, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through your one on your hook, front, back, oops, yarn over, pull through 2 and through the one on your hook, front, back, yarn over, pull through the 2 and through your hook, yarn over, through the front loop, through the back loop, yarn over, pull through those 2, now into the chains for the corner, front loop, back loop, yarn over, pull through those 2, and then because we did slip knot, stitch into that first chain, we've done our stitch into our first chain, so we can just go into the chain space, yarn over, pull through the one in your hook, yarn over, pull through to finish off. Take the scissors, open it out, and you have nothing on one side, but if you want it as a design feature, you get this lovely ridge with the stitching on both sides there. So quite a nice feature if you want it there, but if, as I did the wrong sides together, will give you the ridge. If you want to put the right sides together, then you would end up with virtually nothing other than those ones in the chain space at the beginning. And actually, if you did those through the chains rather than through the chain space, you would end up with not being able to see any of that stitching at all, unless obviously you pull it aside. Okay, so that is the slip stitch method. So for this method, I'm going to be making a mesh effect between the two granny squares. So I'm going to make my slip knot, insert my hook into that 3 chain corner space of the first granny square, and put the slip knot back onto my hook, make my first stitch and chain 2. Then I'm going to pick up my second granny square and I'm going to make a treble. So yarn over into the chain space, yarn over, pull back through, yarn over through 2, yarn over through 2. So that's how our granny squares are going to join together. So we're going to miss the first stitch and we're going to do trebles in the next stitch. So I'm going to chain 1 because I'm traveling over this chain here. I'm going to treble in the first granny square. Then I'm going to miss a stitch and treble in the second granny square. Going to chain 1, going to miss a stitch, and I'm going to treble in the next stitch, and this one's a chain space stitch, so just be careful going through. And then on the back square, going to miss a stitch, going to treble into the next stitch, chain 1, miss a square, so miss a stitch, treble into the next stitch, on the back, miss a stitch, treble into the next stitch on the back, chain 1, miss a stitch, treble into that stitch there, making sure you have gone through because that's the chain stitch, and then on the back square, going to miss a stitch, which is this one here, so I'm going to treble into that stitch there, chain 1, miss a stitch, go into the next stitch, and on the back, miss a stitch, go into the next chain stitch, missing, going into, chain 1, miss a stitch, so I'm going into the chain space here, so I'm going to do a treble into that chain space, likewise on the back, miss a stitch, treble into that chain space, and you end up with a nice mesh effect to join up your granny squares. Here you can just tie off the end as you wish. Obviously, if you have more granny squares, you can just keep going. As I've said previously, I would join all of my shorter ends together and keep going with the shorter ends of the granny squares. Then I would work along the lengths in one go, rather than trying to join a square here, then a square here, then a square here, and a square here. Do all the short lengths, then do all the long lengths. Okay, so that is the mesh method. So that's how to crochet together your granny squares. So if you have any other suggestions of videos you'd like me to make, please put them in the comments below, and also let me know, do you prefer to crochet together your granny squares, or do you prefer to sew together your granny squares? I'd be really interested to know. Don't forget, you can go back and watch this video as many times as you need to. You can pause. There's also the option to do a slow motion part of the video, If you go onto my Facebook page, Facebook group, there's a little video there showing you how you can slow down YouTube videos if there's particular parts that you need to have a look at in more detail. If you get stuck on anything, don't forget you can come into the Conquer Crochet community group, which is on Facebook, and we will be there to help you answer your questions, and we try to answer as many as we can. If not, I will make a video for it and then your question will be answered that way. Next time I'm going to be showing you how you can join your granny squares using the join along method, but until then I have 2 more videos for you to have a look at here. So these videos will help you on your crochet journal, and if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing by clicking on my face and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss a single stitch. Thank you very much for joining me today, and happy hooking!